Hi HH homies, it has been quite a while since we have posted a video, but we're back with some new content. And today, you know, since we're getting into Aries season now, Pisces season is slowly slowing down, and we thought we'd represent that season by talking about some fires. We decided to do this video kind of different from the past ones we've done. Usually we'll collaborate on information together and share our stories and our information back and forth before we actually talk about it on camera. But today we decided to do both different cases. One is really more of an event than a case. But I don't know anything really about what Katie's talking about except a few little facts here and there.
I don't really know much that Gina's going to talk about, so we're kind of doing this like podcast style a little bit.
Exactly, yes.
It'll probably be a little bit of a longer video, so get a snack or some coffee.
Learn about some fun deaths and
mysterious conspiracies.
Yours isn't from that long ago, right?
No, mine's from, I think it took place in the 70s.
I'm gonna take you guys back to December of 1903. Late December back in 1903, bunch of people died in the fire. Okay.
Anyways, jingle.
I am going to talk about the fire of the Iroquois Theatre in Chicago. So it is not called the Iroquois Theatre anymore. It's actually called the Oriental Theatre, and it's in the Loop. It's a gorgeous theater, as Katie's been there. It's literally, I mean, obviously it's one of the oldest theaters in Chicago. So the show that was playing at the Iroquois Theatre at the time was called Mr. Bluebeard. And it starred a very famous Chicago actor. He was kind of like, I want to say like a vaudeville actor, like, you know, very out there with movements and costume and dressing and drag. And the show was a really well-known show at the time. Like, people traveled from outside of Chicago into the city to come see the show. From suburbs, you know, wealthy people came in, which is a big thing because people didn't really travel a lot for theater at that time. And
I mean, you gotta get the whole carriage out.
You gotta take that time.
I'm sorry, Bella's just been arranging herself.
What are you doing? Are you comfy now? You ready to listen? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And the audience was more than 1,700 people at the time. Wow. And this is a lot, and this isn't nice seating that we have now where everything's organized, you know, there's aisles and, you know, actual fire exits, which we'll get to later because that's a big part of the story. And it was extremely crowded, and I'm assuming this theater didn't have modern amenities like air conditioning, and, you know, people didn't really use deodorant a lot and probably smelled like crap. So everyone's, you know, just pushed into this theater together to see this, you know, huge performance. There is a lot of amazing costumes in the cast. There is a woman who is a ballerina, and they have her on, you know, her string ready to fly over the stage, which was really cool at the time because they didn't have a lot of, you know, things to do that in theater at the time either. So having someone, you know, suspended and flying on stage was like a big deal too. It's like, ooh, like, look at that, witchcraft. And the second act of the show began around after 3:15 in the afternoon. Right when it started, basically, one of the lights backstage ignited on a curtain and started a fire in the theater. And at first they didn't think it was that bad. And Eddie Foy himself, who was dressed on stage in drag as a woman, commanded the orchestra to continue playing while the fire was happening.
Seems smart.
So there's a fire going on, and he's like, no, like, this is my time to shine, like, keep playing, it's okay, like, we'll take care of it.
Me?
Calm down. No, literally.
Basically, the dog with the mug.
Then the actors backstage are like, also, oh crap, like, there's a fire going on, we gotta get out of here. There's like a flame-resistant curtain that they're trying to pull out to stop the fire, and they pull it out, but that snags, and the fire catches onto that curtain. So now it's full-on fire and craziness inside the Iroquois Theatre. People then start to lose it, and they're like, we're not listening to Eddie Foy and drag anymore. We gotta get the heck out of here. Like, we're all gonna die. We're all gonna catch on fire. So that's when the actors backstage try to leave and push out the doors in the back so they can get out. When they push out the back doors, it blows an even bigger fireball flame out into the theater. and the flame is so heavy and so powerful that it pushes out one of the front doors. And so luckily, if it wasn't for the giant flame, that one door wouldn't open. And the reason that the doors weren't opening in the first place is because with theaters back in the day, instead of now where you have the doors open out, you had to pull the doors open in. And when you have 1,700 people who are now panicking, they are not pausing and opening the doors so everyone can calmly exit the building. No. Everyone is pushing against these doors and slamming up against the doors, being crushed by other people trying to exit this theater. And the people on the balcony are also basically screwed because, let's talk about some Marxism and some class warfare here, to where, you know, like I said, all the rich people who came in from out of town had the nice seats that they paid for on the main floor, and all the Chicagoans who didn't have enough money were up on the balcony. And to get downstairs to the door, you had to, you know, walk down the stairs, but the doors were all barred off because they didn't want the poor people trying to sit in the rich people's seats. So,
you know, this really is going to tie in with mine later, you'll find out.
Yeah, it's always about money. You know, whoever has the most money, you know, gets to live longer.
Cool.
It's fine. In his memoir, because Eddie Foy lived after this, he didn't die in the fire, he said it was like mad animal stampeding and screaming. Of course, the people who were in the audience right by the fire instantly died because a giant fireball was coming at them.
So if you were the richest of the rich, you died.
You're screwed.
Ha!
Sorry.
Probably where Donald Trump would have been sitting.
You know, if only. Talking about not only all these people piling up and dying on the first floor, we go to the balcony, which this part of the story is honestly the most devastating and tragic and creepy part of the story for me, because there were doors upstairs on the balcony leading to the alley below, but there were no ladders or fire escapes outside the door. So people flipped open the door and fell out. Stories of stories. I don't remember how many stories it was, but I've been in the alley. It's high up from where they show you where the window is leading to the alley, and it's not like, you know, a 5-foot drop.
Yeah, it's not like a small theater.
I'm okay. Like, and it's a brick ground that they're falling onto as well. There was one building across the street where these firefighters were trying to get a ladder for people to crawl on and go to the window across the street, but that fell because, you know, it's hundreds and thousands of people.
Yeah, like you're not gonna wait. Like,
you're like, okay, crawl out one at a time. Like, it's okay. Like, that's not gonna happen. People are dying and people want out, and people at this point where you get into this panic mode where you will kill other people to survive. It's survival skills. It's their people's instincts kicking in. They're not just doing it to be jerks. They're doing it because they want to live. So now you have an alley with piles of bodies. I forgot who described it. I think it was one of the policemen or firemen on the scene. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But they said it was like what you would describe Dante's Inferno as. It, you know, just these like hundreds of people. And this happened within moments. Like, it wasn't like an hour later, like all of a sudden, because all these people are pushing out and no one can see what's in front of them. So they're like, okay, like, we're going, like, because they're not paying attention to the people falling in front of them. And at that point, they're probably like, I don't care, at least I'm out of the building, and I'm not going to have, like, charred remains.
And also, probably, like, the people in the back of, like, that are pushing the people forward. Yeah. Like, probably even if you, like, reach it, like, and you didn't want to jump, like, people are pushing you, so you're just going to fall.
So the diner next door was turned into a morgue for all these bodies, so these families could come down and possibly identify loved ones that were there. Of course, this took an extremely long time because there were so many people there. Yeah. There was one I found on Google that was literally like the back of this carriage, and there were just charred remains of people's bodies like in the back of this carriage because they were just trying to like pile people on and figure out. The sad thing about it is the reason why this got so much attention, not only obviously was it one of the biggest fires in a theater or public place in the US at the time, but it was because it was most of Chicago's upper middle class or upper class at this. If it was
a poor people
or a tenement building or like whatever, it wouldn't have gotten as much attention. And another thing I wanted to mention with the actors too, so most of the actors were able to get out when they pushed the door and the backdraft came through, but unfortunately one of the ballerinas who was on rigging could not get out of her rigging before the fire started. So she burned alive in the fire.
That's like my worst fear for dying, like burning.
The first time I heard that story, I was like, man, that poor girl. I mean, I know all these other, hundreds of thousands of people died, but
something like, imagine like being trapped and like
just not even be able to have that chance to get out or go outside. It's just terrifying to me. This fire was such a big deal in the city of Chicago because it mainly, like I said, affected the upper middle class and the upper class, that it got so much attention. All these people are like, this could have happened to me, this could have happened anywhere else. What if I had been there? And so everyone's playing the blame game now, and everyone's like, okay, well, it's the fire codes and it's this, and all of this stuff happened. So the Chicago Tribune made a list of regulations that the theater didn't adhere to, and is one of the reasons why the fire happened. And these lists were lack of adequate fire alarm, because it was 1903. There were no automatic sprinklers, because it was 1903. There were no marked exits or fire extinguishers to put any sort of fire out.
Because if the actors had had like a fire extinguisher,
right, they had nothing. They didn't have a hose, they didn't have a water gun, they didn't have literally anything to put this fire out. But my favorite is that the two large like flutes that were on top of the roof that the smoke and fire is supposed to go out of, which probably would have helped, were boarded off on the top. Like, literally, why are you putting vents there on the top of your roof if you're going to literally put boards on them? So there's all these things where they didn't have the sprinklers, they didn't have the fire alarm, they didn't have marked exits, they didn't have the doors opening the right way. So obviously this was a recipe for disaster. And the argument for whose fault it was lasted about 3 years. No one was held criminally liable at the end of all of it. But it did have an impact on the fire codes forever. Not even just with the city of Chicago, but for all other theaters, public places, amphitheaters, wherever it was, changed fire codes forever with implementing all of those things I listed off, whether it's, exits, extinguishers, and plus technology has definitely grown since then.
And doors opening out. It's also a helpful thing to not look stupid, is that 90% of the time, any public place you're in, the doors have to open out. So usually push if you're leaving a building. Yeah, especially if there's a giant fire going on. Yeah.
And, always. Not to, trample or step on other people. So even though this horrible thing happened, the fire at the Iroquois Theatre changed fire codes indefinitely, and it was a huge impact around the rest of the country as well. That is the story of the fire at the Iroquois Theatre. Which makes it even creepier is that you can still walk down that alley with some of the original architecture of the building. Obviously, most of it was redone after the fire and, years later from the early 1900s. But just walking down that alley and imagining that it is a place where 500 bodies were piled up on top of each other in the exact place you're walking, and like looking up at the window and being like, that's the window that all these people fell out of to their death, is just honestly disturbing. And of course, me being me, when I did go on a tour there, I took out my little ghost app on my phone and opened it up, and while everyone else was walking around, I asked if anyone was there who wanted to communicate through it. And a few words came up, the word worried, and the word, it was something like wary or be careful or something like that. And I was like, they're talking about the fire codes. Whoever was there, they're like, change those fire codes, and it did happen. Yeah. But it's very creepy, and it's supposed to be the Oriental Theater itself is supposed to be a very haunted place. And I looked up some of it where I didn't see a lot of stuff with specific ghost sightings, but they say sometimes fire alarms will go off, or like someone, like they think someone pulled it, and there's no evidence that like anyone was there or like near a fire alarm. They've had it investigated, and they think that the ghosts of the Iroquois Theatre Fire are causing the fire alarms to trip and having other cold spots and creepy things throughout the theater. So that is the story, and it's still pretty spooky to this day, and they do some spooktacular performances at the theater. Go to the Oriental Theater. Thank you, that is all. And now I am excited to hear about your story.
All right. Fast forwarding to 1984, and we're also going a little outside the city into one of the suburbs, Chicago Heights. This, at the time, was a like blue collar neighborhood, a lot of factory workers, just a lot of manual labor, like people that had money but not a lot of money. It was when steel mills were huge, so a lot of steel workers, just middle class. In the story I found, and I liked it because it has a lot of things, like it has like some conspiracy, some true crime, just a lot of stuff in it. In the fall of 1984, in one of the apartment complexes, the Sunset Apartments, there were dozens, like literally dozens, cases of fires were breaking out randomly at night, during the day. There were robberies, there was vandalism, there was just all kinds of just strange stuff going on. But
sounds like my kind of place.
Right? Like, let's move there. But it couldn't be explained. Like, they couldn't seem to figure out who had done it. Like, there were supposedly investigations going on, but they couldn't pin it on anyone. And also, it would just be weird to be targeting this one apartment complex constantly. You know, like if you're trying to kill somebody that's in that apartment, you probably give up after the first few times of trying to start a fire and just like go kill them.
Right.
And this all happened in a span of like 2 weeks. And residents were like really unsettled. One of the residents was saying that it was just weird, and every night you'd like kind of go to sleep and you'd be scared because you're like, why are these fires happening? Like,
this must be so comfortable,
right? Like,
to be scared every night when you go to sleep that a fire is gonna happen.
Yeah, amazing. Man. But there were rumors that started around this time that it was actually the city who was paying off people to start fires, so that eventually the building would burn down because they wanted those apartments torn down. There are kind of two competing theories as to why the city wanted them to burn down. One was that this apartment complex did have a larger percentage of Black people that lived there. So if they burned down the apartment complex that was more affordable than anything else around, you can drive out.
And let me tell y'all, that's been going on for years. This isn't
this isn't new, and it's definitely not an isolated case.
Welcome to systemic oppression.
Yeah, there's red tape, there's just all kinds of shit, but this is just one case of this happening. They burn the apartments down and naturally drive the Black people out of the city altogether, because if they can't live in the Sunset Apartments, they can't afford rent other places.
Right.
And then the other theory was that the government just wanted these buildings gone because they were in terrible condition. There was often times where there was no heat in the winter, no air in the summer, there was no water, electricity, just a lot of really bad things. Where there was one report where a woman was talking about how when she lived there, people would move out of their actual apartment and then just go outside and sleep in their cars in the parking lot, because at least in a car you can turn it on and have heat, and if there's no water or electricity in your apartment, like,
can you imagine paying to live somewhere and then having to go sleep out in your car because the building isn't being maintained?
Yep. And that still happens. Slumlords everywhere. They just get money from the people that they are renting to and don't pay their mortgages and don't do anything, and then it all comes back on the freaking poor people, which we'll get more into that as well, because there was actually a couple of court cases that kind of arose out of this. So in terms of the rumors, they were hard to believe, but like not hard to believe at the same time. A lot of it was they were trying to pass it off as like bored teenagers, gangs, like, you know, whatever. But of course, they were still only targeting this one building.
Yeah,
so
and more teenagers and other people don't have the time to constantly just be starting fires at the same building.
Yeah, it would make more sense if it were bored teenagers.
Let's try to get caught and do the same fire, the same building, and leave as much evidence as we possibly can.
Yeah, like if it had just been the vandalism or the theft, because there were also thefts happening, that would be a little bit more of a believable theory, because like I feel like bored teenagers are more likely to like vandalize and steal than like start fires that could kill people. And then the second theory that kind of was competing with that, but in my perspective probably both were kind of together, because they're not mutually exclusive.
They're not exclusive, nor are they exclusive.
Yes. But the other theory was that the city just wanted these buildings gone because they were disgusting, as I just said. And instead of going through the procedures that were in place, bureaucracy was just so annoying that they figured, like, let's just skip it all and just burn people out, you know?
Yeah.
And this is just terrifying to think about because they didn't care if people died. As far as I found, nobody was injured or died, thank God. But, like, it could have easily happened. One of those fires could have burned the building down.
Right.
So in the aftermath of all of these fires, eventually the buildings were shut down and eventually torn down. And that is just bizarre in its own way. Like, imagine just getting kicked out of your apartment and having to leave. Just drive off and find somewhere else to live, probably in a new city, because you can't afford to live in that city anymore. So in the aftermath, the few years afterwards, there actually were a couple of lawsuits. I think there were actually several, but there were two big ones where people wanted somebody to be responsible. So in the big trial, so there's the big main trial, this one was against the city and several board members. They blamed the city because there was overwhelming evidence that the conspiracy, the rumor, was actually true. And a lot of former tenants testified at the trial. One of them, Kathy Green, said that one day when she was coming back to her apartment, an explosion literally, like, rocked her apartment, like she felt it. And then, to make things weirder, immediately after that happened, a couple of guys walked out passing her, and she asked them, like, what are you doing here? And they claimed that they were two ununiformed police officers and that, you know, they were investigating. But how would they know that they had something to investigate if it just happened? I guess they could have been investigating one of the other fires or vandalism or whatever.
But like randomly, and then to have that happen immediately after is sketch.
It's bizarre. And so she watched them leave, and she just saw them go out to two unmarked cars and drive away. Another tenant testified that the city housing department literally paid him $50 to start fires. I know $50 was worth more back then, but still, like, $50 to start, like, what? And then one of the owners testified that he had asked one of the inspectors what wasn't up to code, like what needed to be fixed, as if, like, in his mind, I assume it's a him just because men that's really all the explanation you need. But yeah, he asked, like, what wasn't up to code, what could they fix, and the inspector told him not even to bother because the mayor wanted the buildings down. So basically, like, dude, don't even try to fix anything because the mayor wants these buildings down.
Leave everything not in code, so you guys have a higher chance of dying. It's gonna be a-okay. It's
gonna be awesome. Another tenant testified that kind of after the fires and before the building was condemned, that an inspector knocked on his door and told him, I'm sorry I have to do this to you, but if you stay, they'll burn you out. So this was somebody working for the housing department that literally knew, and I mean, this inspector probably didn't have a ton of power and, like, was warning people to get out before they were burned out and lost all their possessions or possibly their lives in addition to their apartment.
How is that even a legal thing that can happen?
It's not.
But
it's not.
So people couldn't, like, go to the police and been like, I've just been threatened that I'm going to be burned out of my apartment. Can you do something?
But if you go to the police of the city that is paying to start the fires, what are they going to do about it?
Yeah.
You know? Despite admitting any wrongdoing, they claimed that they had nothing to do with it. The city and several different board members did end up settling before the jury could reach a verdict in the trial. They settled for $4.5 million in 1992. And the kicker is that none of the former tenants were plaintiffs in this trial, so they got none of that money.
Disappointed, but not surprised.
Yeah. There was a separate suit that was brought several years before that was brought by several of the tenants against the apartment building's insurance company. That one was also won, and that settled for $85,000, but half the money went to lawyers' fees, and then the other half was split among a number of tenants to the point where they probably didn't get much. Yeah, that was kind of it as far as that went. Those are the two big trials, and while the biggest one settled, it is pretty telling to me. I feel like there's a lot of evidence there, especially the inspector who said he was being paid to start fires. He's literally admitting to a crime, so I don't really see a lot of reason to lie about that when you're literally implicating yourself in a crime. Yeah, these settlements just prove to me that the city was involved. That's pretty much it for this story. It's just sad to me because even though no one was killed or injured, they were definitely out of their homes, which sucks. So even though this fire did not cost anyone their lives or injure anyone, it cost people their homes. A lot of people lost their possessions. There was one former tenant that testified that there were literally burglaries in the middle of the daytime, like people carrying entire mattresses out of the apartments in broad daylight. I just thought it was interesting, especially because it's one of those conspiracies that proved to be true situations.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our fire and arson stories for this video of HH Homies, and we can't wait to do more investigations and post more videos.
We're gonna start doing solo videos sometimes where I'll cover true crime, Gina will cover supernatural.
Yes. Yeah, it's a work in progress, and we're getting there. We're really excited to have more time to actually do what we like to do.
Because we're both unemployed.
Woohoo! Kind of. Let's get monetized. Okay, anyways. Thanks, guys. Have an awesome day and or night wherever you are in the universe, in a swamp, in a cave.
In whatever thread of time you're watching this video.
Yeah. Well, see ya. Thanks for watching, guys.